Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Temple Institute Parsha class. I'm Gedalia Meyer, podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. It's been another week, and things don't seem to have improved much. When will this thing be over once and for all? This is the question that pretty much everyone is asking here and in many places in the world. They are also asking related questions, like why did it have a resurgence? Why did a resurgence happen in this place and not in that? Sometimes it seems like this virus is playing a cruel game with us, testing us to see what move we will make to fend it off, and laughing at us when we take the wrong path. Should we go back to lockdown? Should we just get on with our lives and hope for the best while maintaining whatever manner of safeguards we can, since endless lockdown is not really an answer to anything? What are we supposed to do with something that has confounded the best that science can offer well into the 20th century and leaves us feeling like we are stuck in the 14th century? These questions apply not only to the politicians who have to make these decisions for the public, or the scientists who have to supply the information for those politicians, but to all of us in our own personal ways. We have all been forced to make choices that we were never really trained to make and would prefer to avoid. But this option is no longer available, assuming it really was before this pandemic. Those decisions have to be made by every one of us, whether we like it or not. And we must make them even though we are fully aware that much of the times we are shooting in the dark. This week's Parsha is called Pinchas. Like last week's, this one is also the name of a person. Phinehas was someone who came up at the end of last week's Parsha in a brief incident that could be easily overlooked if it weren't for the dramatic declaration that begins this week's Parsha. The earlier incident was one that involved the nearby nation of the Midianites infiltrating the Israelite camp when it was situated in the middle of what is now Jordan. The Midianite strategy was to have their women seduce the Israelite men into illicit sex, and in doing so, getting them to worship the idolatrous gods of Midian. This, they widely adduced, would put the Israelites in God's disfavor and perhaps put them at a military disadvantage. This strategy worked perfectly, at least to a degree. God's predictable anger struck, and Moshe was told to instruct the tribal leaders to kill those who had committed idolatry. During the ensuing battle, an Israelite man brought a Midianite woman right smack in the middle of the encampment in front of everyone, including Moshe. While the Torah does not describe what this guy was really up to, it was obvious what he had in mind. The Torah states rather puzzlingly that those watching this unlikely scene were crying, as if they had no idea what to do. This is particularly surprising, being as they had just been instructed to knock this sort of action off with deadly force. Why were they just crying? At this fortuitous moment, Phinehas comes upon the scene. He saw what was happening and grabbed a spear. He stabbed the spear into both the man and the woman, presumably simultaneously, and God's anger was abated. The closing line of last week's Parsha states that no less than 24,000 people were killed in this whole story, a not insignificant number. With that, our Parsha begins. This Phinehas, we are told, was to be rewarded for his bold action in staving off the wrath of God from the Israelites. His reward is unprecedented and seemingly impossible, but it is stated clearly in the Torah. He was to be granted the status of kohen, or priest, a status that had previously been reserved solely for Aaron and his 4 sons, who had been listed many times earlier in the Torah, and their future descendants, but no one else. Phinehas gained this privileged status not from birthright, but by his spur-of-the-moment action. Just to clarify an important point, priestly status is to this day highly regulated in Judaism, even though there are no longer any significant privileges given to a kohen. It remains one of the few relics of biblical lineage in Judaism and has been demonstrated somewhat convincingly through genetic testing. Phinehas was the only case in the Bible of someone who made it into this status without having the required lineage. It should be pointed out, however, that Phinehas was indeed a descendant of Aaron. In fact, he was a grandson of Aaron. So why was he not a kohen based on his lineage alone? Because that status, it turns out, was reserved for those descendants of Aaron's sons who were born after the exodus from Egypt. Phinehas, uniquely, was a grandson who had been born in Egypt, thus ironically disqualifying him from priestly status. It was only with his decisive action here that he gained what he had missed out due to a quirk in the rules. Phinehas did what everyone else was unable to do. The two people involved in the illicit act, the Torah states, were not just anybody. The man was an Israelite tribal leader, while the Midianite woman was of royal descent. They were doing their brazen act right in front of the tabernacle, the holiest spot in the encampment. Perhaps everyone else, including Moshe, was so flabbergasted by this outrageous act that they were stunned into confusion. All they could do was cry. It was only Phinehas who was able to size up the situation and seize the moment and do what had to be done. There is one more tidbit of information that is needed to complete this story. A highly unusual feature is found in the lettering of a single word describing the reward of Phinehas. The phrase, covenant of peace, is used to describe his eternal fate. While this sounds like a wonderful outcome for a bold act, the Torah puts a kind of biblical asterisk on the word for peace. That word, of course, is shalom. The third letter of the word is called a vav, which for over 2,000 years has been written in Hebrew as a straight vertical line. In this case alone, in the entire Bible, there is a long-standing tradition to write that letter with a broken vertical line, as if it were two vertical dashes. Why this is so is a mystery. Why would the word for peace, a well-deserved fate for a person who did restore peace to the fractured Israelites, be written with a broken letter? Nobody knows a definitive answer to this question. But there are plenty of suggestions. They range from the mystical to the philosophical to the legal. In fact, some have questioned the entire tradition and wondered how it snuck into Judaism to begin with. A Torah with even a single incorrectly written letter is considered invalid and cannot be used in public services. The tradition here is to deliberately write this letter in an invalid manner. How could this be? Nevertheless, the tradition has gained a firm footing within Jewish communities all over the world. If a Torah were found today without this odd nuance, it would probably require immediate correction, meaning to break up the vertical line into two smaller vertical dashes. This nuance is an oddity in the twists and turns of Jewish tradition, in ancient Hebrew writing, and in the rabbinic interpretation of the Bible. As far as what it really signifies, perhaps we can suggest an interpretation that is neither overly philosophical, mystical, nor legal, but simply straightforward common sense. Phinehas was promised a reward for his bold but nevertheless controversial action. He did what no one else was willing to do because they were temporarily paralyzed with confusion. His action was decisive and ultimately successful, but not beyond any sense of doubt. The bottom line is that he killed a tribal leader, a highly controversial move in a deeply tribal society. Not everyone was willing to take it upon themselves to do such a thing. In fact, no one else was willing to do such a thing other than Phinehas himself. His reward was justly deserved, but it had to come with a caveat. He gained the status of priesthood for himself and his descendants as a result of his action. In fact, it happens that Phinehas, out of all the next several generations of descendants of Aaron, became a highly significant figure in the Israelite leadership. His career as a leader stretched for decades into the future, playing a major role well into the time of the conquering and settlement of the land of Israel. Had he not taken this decisive step, he probably would not be remembered in biblical history at all. Jewish tradition has it that his descendants controlled the office of high priest for several centuries. No small achievement for one who wasn't destined from birth to be a priest at all. This perhaps is what it means to have that promise of a covenant of peace. But the caveat is this: that peace would come with a price. It would be a peace which was not entirely whole, but would be broken, fractured. People can enjoy long and productive lives, a very treasured form of peace, but still suffer from occasional guilt pangs or other problems. Phinehas, perhaps, to be subjected to such a fate. He had a choice and he acted upon it, but he would suffer the consequences of having to make such a choice. There would always be second guessing about what he did and wondering whether it was truly correct. The fractured peace that Phinehas would encounter is something that many of those who make tough decisions must face. They are thrust into a position of having to make a choice that they aren't 100% sure about, and they nevertheless rise to the moment. Their reward, however, comes with a price. They have to face themselves throughout the rest of their lives and wonder if what they did was really the right thing. They didn't ask for this fate, but it came upon them nevertheless. Spiritual rewards come with costs. For better or worse, this is the situation many of us find ourselves in with regard to the times we are living in. We are forced to make choices we would rather not face. Those choices may involve school or work or children or parents. They may involve strain in friendships or relationships. They may have repercussions on career or financial situations or even survival. But they have to be made whether we like it or not. The rewards for our choices may not be as palpable and significant as those of Phinehas, and the consequences may not be as momentous. But those rewards are there in whatever form they take, even if they may seem to be unjust. Fractured peace is one of the consequences of tough choices. It may not be as complete and as perfect as we would like, but it is still a form of peace. Shabbat Shalom.